Hey everyone, welcome to DevCentral Connects, and this is the AS3 Foundation series. This is the final week. We're wrapping up. This is episode should have been episode 5. This is technically episode 4. I combined last week's episodes because I was sick last Monday. I'm glad that we got Thursday in, and we'll get these final 2 episodes in this week, and then we'll be done with the foundations of AS3. And today transitions a little bit from stuff that's pretty easy because the tools do it for you, to starting to kind of think through doing this stuff on your own, and still the tool will help you with some schema validation and whatnot. But we're going to kind of transition from pre-canned examples into or pre-canned applications that I had running on my big IP that we migrated to, trying to think through and creating our own. And we'll create those from example config, and I'll show you where to find those things. But before we begin, I just wanted to the ticker was going at the beginning, but App World, February 6th through 8th, out in San Jose, California. The DevCentral team will be there, and a lot of other awesome F5 people will be there. And so we hope you can join us out there. Lots to learn, especially, Big IP Next has been on the road show this fall. It went GA, and I think end of September, early October for LTM and Web Application Firewall. And so those are out there, and it's a new thing. It's technically version 20, and TMM is still underlying, but a lot of it other than that is different. And AS3, what we're working on right now, is a big part of that. And so that's we're laying groundwork now in the new year, leading into App World, and then beyond. A lot of content going to be hitting on DevCentral around Big IP Next. And so I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully you can join us out at App World, and you'll learn a lot about Big IP Next there, as well as distributed cloud and Nginx and all the other good things that we do here at F5. But I'm really looking forward to being there, and I hope you can join. And of course, we are out here on the socials at YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn. Just found out last night that our streaming platform, Instagram, finally opened up their API. So maybe we'll even hit the gram, so my kids say. I don't really do much on Instagram, but maybe we'll do something on Instagram and have a little bit of fun with that. So we might start streaming there as well. But aside from being out in other communities, join us on DevCentral at community.f5.com. We bring videos and all that out other places, but a lot of the documentation that we do from a written perspective is it happens on DevCentral, whether that's in technical forums, we're just kind of trying to help solve problems for each other, or we're writing articles on technology features, solutions, that kind of thing. So if you have not joined DevCentral, join today. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can engage with us there, and not just out here on the social, or the streaming platforms and the socials and whatnot. And Jose, welcome as always. Great to see you today. And okay, so let's talk about what we're going to do today. Let's talk about what we've done, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do. So the previous episodes, we kind of covered what AS3 is, and how you think about it and engage with it. If you're coming from a standpoint of still managing your big IPs with ClickOps and doing everything in the GUI and not really automating anything yet, this is the series for you. So if you're just joining today and you have not been the previous episodes, go watch the earlier episodes. And so we started that first episode with that. And then in the second episode, I wanted to introduce the tools that we would be using for the rest. And so I had my good friend Ben Novak, who built the F5 extension, and that's what we've been using in VS Code. So we went through all the kind of cool features in VS Code F5 extension that you'll want to be aware of. to do the rest of the stuff that we've done. And then we kind of consolidated the looking at F5 configurations and the diagnostics that you might need to handle if you're moving from an existing configuration to an AS3 declaration of that configuration, and then went ahead and converted that config into AS3 declarations and deployed them. So that's where we left off on Thursday, and today we're gonna do something. Sorry, I still have remnants of my cold, and my voice gives out pretty quickly if I don't keep drinking water. But today we're going to go into the common partition, the common tenant, which is common shared, and then also building net new. So we'll just kind of start from scratch. And I don't know the schema like I know being able to run through 50 TMSH commands. I'm still, my brain is still all around imperative stuff, right? And so I've done some stuff with AS3 from a migration standpoint, but I don't really know AS3. I can't hand crank that out. And so we're going to say, well, if you can't do that, what is this show about? And we'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to start with the common partition and kind of talking through, what to do with that. And at the end of, last show when we started doing our migrations, well, all of my stuff on my big IP is in the common partition because I don't need to be multi-tenant. I set some different partitions up to test for people in the community. In fact, a couple rules that we'll look at today, I did have in a different partition because I was looking at can you pass with a shared var iRules command, can you pass data from a front end virtual server iRule to a backend virtual server iRule, and make sure that both of those iRules can access that same value. And you use the shared var command to do that if you're doing things VIP to VIP. But does that work across partitions? And so I was testing that. In fact, it does work. It's fine. But anyway, I had a partition for that. But most of the time, I just used the common partition. And so if you're converting with ACC, then it's going to do its conversion to where your objects were. And so everything ends up in common. And I can show you that. Let me get shared here. Let me go over to my big IP if it's still, there we go. All right. So you can see that the Nerd Life that we deployed, it is sitting in common shared. It's not its own little partition. Of course, I guess I had more than I thought I did sitting out there. But most of the things that I have deployed here, the virtual server is common. But then you have this common shared, and this is a special case tenant for AS3 to where those objects are shared. So what objects do you put there? And I'm going to share a link for you to watch later if you want, if you're so inclined. Let me go ahead and grab that. John Callalang, one of our solution engineers, solution architects. I don't know the exact title, but all around awesome guy. He has a 12, 13, 15-minute video talking about the common partition and how he uses it. And he goes into more than just AS3. He starts to talk, I think, about some Ansible workloads in there. And so don't let that scare you off. He spends a few minutes talking about common. And so, what we're going to do today is we're just going to build some things out in common. Right now, I have this virtual server. We're going to blow that away and do something different. So if you remember, once you've deployed an application, you can come up here in our AS3 and say, hey, I've got some things. And sure enough, I've got what we deployed last week, this Nerd Life application. We got the VIP referencing pools. Not much else is in there other than the VIP and pool. And so what I can do is blow that away. Can delete that tenant. Thinking about it. Still thinking. Okay, I got a 200 success that is gone. And so this should update now and tell me, yeah, no, got nothing. So yeah, okay. So my config's gone there. We can come out here to my big IP and validate. This Nerd Life VIP should go away now that I did that. So let's refresh that, click on, and boom. Okay, that's gone. So let's take a look at what we might put in the common partition. And at the end of the day, the whole concept of AS3 is to to declare your applications. You want your applications to be kind of in their own space, so that it's pretty clear where the delineation is between applications. So you might have 4 or 5 VIPs that are part of one application, and so you bundle those into a tenant, and that becomes your declaration. But there are things that you might use across applications, things like iRules or policies, whether like a security policy with a web application firewall, a local traffic policy that you might do. And so there might be monitors, and you can certainly recreate those things in your tenants, and that's okay if that's what makes it best from an operational perspective or a business logic perspective, and all that. You can do that, but it is duplication of objects, and you think about uh, some of them. It's just configuration space, right? Once it all compiles down, it's not a big deal. But things like monitors, if you're using same pools, but the way that they're being accessed from the front end is different, and you recreate those pools. If those pools have monitors on them, then maybe you're duplicating effort of monitors, and there's only so many monitors that you can have before you start to overload the system. That's different from system to system, so I don't have those numbers in my head. But config size at the end of the day will eventually matter. But really, it's the performance objects that you need to be careful about. And so monitors are one of those things you might want to have in a common partition. So we won't be exhaustive with that, but let's take a look at adding a couple different iRules to the common partition, and so, or to the common tenant. And so if we look at a template here to build common things, we can well, let's relive one of Ben's tips, and I'll show you what we need to do. So we're going to select a language, and I'm going to put JSON in here. And if I start DO, that's declarative onboarding. We're not going to cover that here, but I can also do telemetry streaming, and there's some samples in there for AS3. If I start AS3, boom, there's a sample template that can get me started, so I don't have to like hand crank from scratch every single property that I might need to actually get a deployment deployed. Excuse me. And so what I'd like to do with the tool, and I've already added a GitHub issue, is I want to expand this list because as I'll show you here in a minute, there's a fantastic list out on GitHub of tremendously different ways that you might use AS3, from the different ways you might add persistence to the different ways you might manage your certificates or do security with TLS. And so a lot of different examples that could be loaded in here. And so it's just a matter of making that happen. So I need to look at the source and how that gets added and all that, but I'll get a GitHub pull request submitted hopefully by the end of the year to flesh out all these templates. But for now, we can click on this AS3 template here, and we can look at the schema here. You put the schema, and then when you just hover over these things, it's going to tell you what all these fields are, and if you add a field that isn't appropriate, it'll flag it for you. But what we have here is we have the AS3 class, and then within that we have an ADC declaration. And then here we start with our actual application. In this case, it's not common. It's not there. And so I pulled out, um, kind of the basics of what the common and special case, because you still have your AS3. Our action is going to be deploy. We want to deploy this. And then the declaration, we have a class ADC schema version here that's values not accepted. Okay, well, I can close it down to, I installed the 348 on my big IP, so maybe that's just a warning because of a rule. In fact, we could look at that. Is that a diagnostic? I don't know how you get to where this validation comes up, because the latest, which I have here linked, is indeed 348. So that's an interesting comment. I'll have to follow up on that. Let's just do 345 so we don't scare off anything that might break. But okay, so this is kind of the skeleton, if you will, for a common declaration. In fact, let me just save that as a skeleton. AS3 common skeleton, and I want that on downloads. Okay, so I can come back and reference this. And of course, I've got this red up here, and that's telling me, hey, there's something wrong with your JSON. And that's just because I haven't populated out an actual object in here yet, and I finished that with a comma. So if I take that comma away, it says, okay, JSON is valid now, but I'm going to add things to it. So, I need the comma. The other thing I'll say about VS Code, if you're just getting started, I have another extension called, I think it's rainbow brackets. Let me see. The ones I have. Maybe it just does it natively for me in this. I also use PyCharm for my Python development, so maybe it's just thinking I needed to install that here. Maybe that's the case. Anyway, in PyCharm, I use rainbow brackets because I get lost in the different tiers. So if whatever language you're using in VS Code is not doing this natively for you, this bracket coloring, because you notice I started yellow out here and then got to purple and then to blue, and so I'm able to match up my brackets. And so that's the great thing about using an IDE versus using a text pad, is those kinds of features are super helpful in finding things that might be wrong. But okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to add a couple iRules in here. And so the object that we're going to add is, we're going to call this, let's see. First of all, let me look at what we have. Okay, so I have a couple iRules. I was talking about the shared var testing, and I've got this shared var test FE for front end and then back end. So let me just call that. Yeah, so we'll do shared var iRule, and then okay, so we got another color there, which is good. And then we always need to define the class. And this is the iRule class. And notice here, let me back that up, just so that we can all learn together. I'm getting autocomplete here, which is fantastic. Not only of the appropriate field here, but okay, so it auto-populated service HTTP for me. That's not what I want here. I actually want an iRule, so I can back that off. And so yeah, I could add an I file in here. A lot of I things, so it's going to auto-populate lists, and not even what it starts with, but hey, anything with an I. It's kind of cool. All right, so I want a class of an iRule, and then I actually need to put the iRule itself in there, and then I need to put the iRule here. So I could do an iRule string. Nope, I can't. So I could do a URL. I could pull that in. I could use a big IP. So I could reference from common shared. I could reference another rule. I could do a copy from. So here are the things I could do. But we're going to do base 64. And we learned last time that that we can do a B64 in code just by, right clicking and making it happen. So this is the shared var FEI rule. So let's come over here to that one. And I'm just going to highlight my I rule. And bam. And so let me copy that, and I'll bring that over to our skeleton code here and slap that in there. Okay. And so I could also, so I've got the name, and then I could also add a remark in here if I wanted to. So do a remark, and let's say test I rule for shared var command with partitions. And then so I got doesn't like something there. What is it not liking? Object has more properties. Oh, I got it. I'm in the wrong spot. All right, so let me X out of that. That needs to be outside the I rule itself. That needs to be up here. Boom. Okay. So, okay, so let's repeat that. Let's do that for the other one. So I need to comma that one. And then shared var backend I rule. And then let's do that again. Class I rule. Let's go ahead and add a remark. Oh, there are the other things we got there. Expand, I rule label, remark. Okay. So what's the difference between anybody know what the difference is between a label and a remark? Comment, please. Optionally friendly name for this object. Arbitrary text pertaining to this object. Okay. Yep. Not really sure what the difference is between a label and a remark in the context of AS3. So if you know, let me know. But we'll go ahead and stick with remark. Okay. And then here, let me see. So this would be front end, right? Is that what? Yeah, front end. And then here I could do back end test. Don't really need to type all that out again. Okay. And then we can do our I rule, expand that out. We'll do our base 64. And then let's go grab the back end, which is here. Encode. Copy that. Okay. All right. So we have a common partition or a common declaration now. We got a couple I rules in there, and we could expand over time. In fact, that's one of the things that John mentioned in the video is like, you don't need to go from 0 to 100% in day one. Pick something that is easy to transition, like things that are objects that are used across many applications, and move those things into an AS3 declaration. And then you can start to move workloads over time to their own declarations, and then more workloads, and then eventually, you've made the migration completely. It's like like Rome wasn't built in a day. A lot of phrases like that. It's one of those things that you just want to take your time, take little bites, and then eventually you'll get there across the board. So that's what we're doing today. We're taking little bites. We are just creating a couple I rules, and we're going to put them in the common shared tenant ID that we created. And so let's go ahead and let's do a post as an AS3 declaration. Let's hope we got it all right. Watching, like, you could watch on this camera, but the screen is a little small in front of me. Posting AS3, it's thinking about it, and let's see. Did it like it? I missed. Well, let's go check. Oh, there we go. Hello. It popped up there, right there. Codes 200, message success, and then here's our declaration. So we can go out there and take a look just to validate. We go out here to our iRules, and we have a couple now in common shared. So we've got shared var be iRule, shared var fe iRule. Oh, interesting. It added an extension to. I wonder if that's because I named them the same thing. Let me delete that and then do that again. Let's go back to here's our schema. So let's do. Oh, that is what we named them. So I'm a dum-dum. Okay, that's okay. Let's go ahead and send that back. All right. So while that's posting, and before we move on, I just want to hear from everybody out there, whether or not you celebrate Christmas, or maybe you celebrate a different holiday this time of year or whatever. I want to hear your top 3 or 4 worst Christmas songs, or Hanukkah songs, or Kwanzaa songs, or whatever. If there's other holidays this time of year, I have certainly a top 5 list of mine, and I'll share them if you want to hear them. But there's a couple songs that are just, they're so bad, and I like it's an instant turn the radio off. In this day and age where everybody kind of listens to Spotify and whatever, you can build your own lists and never hear those songs. But sometimes I'm in the car and I just put on the radio. 'Cause, if I'm always listening to the music I know and I like, I never hear new stuff. And and so, but I don't really know. There's not a whole lot of new stuff happening in the Christmas song scene, at least from what I heard. So anyway, you have anything holiday songs of any kind, and they're terrible and you hate them? I'd love to hear about it. Um, uh, Anything Bruce Springsteen related to Christmas is not awesome, and it's just it's so laughable. It's like painful to the ears. But anyway, I digress. Okay, so our iRules back. We can go look. Yep, we got 200 again, and so they're okay. They're there. All right. So let's transition now. We've done some common. We've talked about common. Let's build an app from scratch. So let me kill that out, and we'll build our own tenant. So we'll kill our skeleton. I don't want to save that because I don't want that stuff in my skeleton. And in fact, it doesn't matter if I save it or not, because it's there and I can pull it out, because now I have AS3. I have an AS3 declaration with that same stuff, and so I can pull it out of my Big IP if I want to. And just a note real quick on, ultimately, all of this AS3 code that you're creating is not something that's just sitting in your Mac or Windows or Linux box in on your file system, not backed up. You're thinking, some kind of version control where your source of truth is living there. And so when changes happen to that, those are the changes that then get deployed to your Big IP, because you have some kind of a CI/CD tool chain that's managing that stuff. It's not like what I'm doing here, and I'm just showing examples, and it's all on my local file system. That's good for learning. When you're moving to a managed test environment or a production environment, you definitely want to be using source control. And so if you're totally new to any kind of automation at all, tools I'd recommend that you start to learn. We're working with JSON. You definitely want to know JSON formatting. You want to know Git. You want to know GitHub, GitLab. Whatever kind of Git centralized repository management tool that you or your organization will use. GitHub. I use GitHub a lot. I use GitHub or GitLab a little, and there are some nuances, but mostly, they're the same, and with some, features one way or the other. But at the end of the day, Git is Git, and it's just, how you're managing uh, the ancillary stuff with Git. But you want to know how to you'll want to know how to manage all of your code from a centralized place, build all your business logic around that, so that you're taken care of. And like, if my Mac goes away and the big IP fails, then where are your configs and how you do it. Same thing you do with regular big IP configs. You have to manage those backups somehow. The benefit of doing it with code instead of UCS files or SCF files, is the agility you get from that is stellar. Okay, let's build a regular application. And so again, I don't need those anymore. Don't save that. All right. So let's build just from the sample here. Let's do JSON and then AS3. There's the sample. Okay. So we're going to build a simple HTTP application with a round robin pool. This sample application that's the name of the app. So we can name that whatever we want. And let's do my AS3 Foundations app. Okay. And then we can call the actual, I guess that's my declaration. Well, I guess we'll see how, all the different tiers. I'm still not 100%. So this I would say is going to be my virtual. Like, this is my application. So everything I group in that tenant, that's going to be what my tenant is, because that's the class I've defined. Class is tenant. So this is my tenant name. And then my virtual servers are going to be in this. So if I had multiple virtual servers in here, they would be here under this class application here. Okay, so let's do A1 app. That's not very descriptive, but let's see. And that's HTTP. So that's a service class HTTP. There's many different service classes. We'll go look through some examples after we get this one done. But virtual addresses. So this is my destination. If you're familiar with the nomenclature of the big IP, the virtual address is this is the VIP address. And then because it's a class of service HTTP, it's going to assume here port 80. If you don't want it to be port 80, you can change that. And that is virtual port. There we go. And then the virtual port is, you can set it to whatever you want it to be. So in our case, it is a port 80 app that we're doing, but it assumes that in this declaration. If you're not port 80, you can change it. Well, let's just go ahead and change it. We'll set it to 8080. And then the virtual server address, that's the VIP address. So the destination and a config, that would have these things combined into 10.0.0.1.10:8080. Those are separated into different attributes here. And then we're going to establish a pool. And we've called that web pool. So this is the reference of that web pool. Again, we have a class for that. That's the class of pool. We have an HTTP monitor. It's using a default monitor. If we had custom monitors, we could add to that. And we would have more declaration down here. And then again, this is where you want to think through where your objects go. So if I have a monitor of HTTP, well, that's a built-in monitor, and that's not a big deal. I'm sorry, I was thinking more the actual pool itself. So if you have this pool and you're going to use it for multiple applications across tenants, then you probably don't want to monitor that n number of times. One version of monitoring is probably sufficient. So maybe if this web pool was something I'm using in multiple applications, I would move this web pool declaration into my common, and then I would reference it from here. And so members, I'm starting out with 2 members here, and that is a list of members. You have a service port of 80. And so if you have members of multiple ports, then you would end up with multiple sets of declarations. So here you've got the members, everything that's service port 80 is going to be in this first grouping. But if you had another service port, then you could do another set and say, let's say we're 8080 in here, and then you can have server addresses, and then let's do 192.0.1.30 is going to be in the server port. Okay. And then that way, that's how that's done. So because they separate the port and the address in AS3, you just have to be aware that if you need additional ports in your pools, those are handled separately. And we're not talking about it today, but another thing that you'd want to be very familiar with in building out AS3 declarations and all that, some kind of a templating language, whether it's Jinja 2. Coming from the Python world and building web apps, I'm very familiar with Jinja 2 templating, but there's a lot of different templating engines that you can use out there. But I think Ansible uses Jinja, maybe Terraform uses some version of Jinja. Everybody watching, you tell me what Ansible and Terraform use, but I think Ansible's Jinja as well. But that will give you the ability of, like, if you're providing like an Excel spreadsheet or pulling data from some kind of a IPAM or whatever, wherever you're pulling your data from, to be able to build these templates, service discovery, whatever, and it knows that you have multiple ports, then you can just iterate through with a template by port and then add the addresses under that. And so you wouldn't need to, in your template, have 2 different layers of these. You would have one of these, and then you would have some kind of an iterator, for loop or while loop or whatever, to go through the different service ports and then attach the addresses and all that. So having a templating engine makes a lot of this easier for you in cranking out your declarations. And so if you go look at in the F5 DevCentral repos out on GitHub, and you'll find examples of AS3 declarations in templates for Ansible or Terraform or whatever. You'll see that a lot of them are templatized, and instead of having like a service port right here, you would have something like something like that, and then so this is something that's going to be fed in from the template. And of course, that's not valid right here. But anyway, that's kind of the point there. And I digress. I won't go too far more in the weeds. But as far as skills you're building, you want to know JSON, you want to know Git and a Git hosting facility or site, GitLab, GitHub, and then you'll want to know templating as well. And then you'll build on from there into tools like Ansible and Terraform and that. Okay. And so we should be able to, if we've got our application from the basics, we changed what was appropriate to us and our application. And so we can go ahead and deploy here now. And so let's give that a deploy. And it should pop up here, giving us a 200. But we see that down here in the notes. Put 200, okay. And then boom, okay. And so yeah, my AS3 Foundation's app Tenant was created with a pool with a couple different service ports, and that worked. Ansible, okay, John, thank you. Ansible's Jinja, Terraform is just Terraform. Oh, okay. Terraform. Yeah, is that just standard HCL, the HashiCorp configuration language? So I've really kind of avoided loving Terraform. Sorry, Sebastian. I know I saw your post. Sebastian, if you're watching this now or watching it later, and you got like the light up Terraform thing to go in your background of your videos. It's, it's just one more language to learn, and that's why I've kind of started to look at Pulumi, because Pulumi it allows you to pull in Terraform modules, and you can do everything native in Python. You don't have to learn HCL, and so I've started to look a little bit at Pulumi, and maybe I'll just skip over Terraform. But it's like anything else. It's like if you don't really want to learn it, you won't learn it. But then when there's a need, you'll pick it up. So all right. So let's go over to our big RP now, and we can go to our virtual servers. And if we come down here, lo and behold, we now have a My AS3 Foundations app. And you can see there that there is our app description. Service main is the name. Okay, so we didn't change our name. Okay, so A1 app HTTP. Oh, that's just the description. Okay, so the virtual itself is here. A1 app. Okay, so that's, I guess, defining what you're calling it, but that's not actually the name itself. So the service HTTP, this is actually the VIP definition here. So good to know. And a lot of these things, like you learn by doing, right? It's like, because I can read and look at schema definitions all day, and I don't know where everybody else is on your development journey, but in working in Go or Python, and even back in the day in Perl, for whatever reason, my brain just does not grok most API definitions and product documentation for programming languages. I just have to do it, and I have to see what things do, because I can look at it and it's like, it's all defined there, dude. Go read the documentation. It's like, I'm looking at the documentation and none of that stuff makes sense to me. So it's like I just have to, get dirty. Who watched the Magic School Bus when you were kids? Like Miss Frizzle. It's like, hey, it's time to go get dirty and make mistakes and all that. And that's me. I gotta touch it. I gotta do things with my hands. So we learned there, yeah. So this is the description, but the service main, that's what actually became. So that's not helpful. It's not a helpful name. So we would figure that, but we do know that this is in the folder. This is our partition. This is our I guess our folder in there, and then our service name, our service main is there. Okay, so that's a very basic HTTP. But let's go out to the. Let me make this bigger. I'll just go down here into the corner. Actually, let me go up here. Well, I'll just go back to the side. It's covering the important stuff. Okay, so there's example applications, and I make fun of product documentation, and there's like the schema reference for AS3. Is it possible to create VIP in common? Yes, in a common shared partition. So the question is from Practice Guru: is it possible to create a VIP in common partitions? From an AS3 perspective, for official common perspective or common partition, no. But you can create it in the common shared tenant, and that is segmented from the common proper. But you can create them there. And so out here, AS3 schema, kind of hard to read for me in some of the attributes of what works and what doesn't. But being able to do it on the VS3 code side, I'm sorry, the VS code side, and being able to pull up what attributes, and it's giving you the drop down list. It's actually easier for me to grok it in VS code as I'm trying to type things than it is on the schema reference itself. But there are things that are helpful in schema reference that might not be as intuitive in VS Code. So it's a both and, not an either or for me. And then of course we have DevCentral too. So as I get stuck on things, I can ask questions, and then in me asking the question and the experts weighing in, then everybody benefits from that, right? And so don't be afraid to get out there and look like you don't know anything. We all don't know anything until we know something, right? And so it's one of those things where pride in this industry is career limiting, right? You need to be willing to say and show, hey, I don't know something about this. Can you help? Because everybody, most, I won't say everybody, most people I've worked with at all the different companies that I've been at over the years, everybody's willing to help. And just, if you have enough humility to be able to say, hey, I'm stuck, help out. Um, so there's examples here. You have an HTTP. We didn't do one of those, but here, which is different from the other one, is we're introducing TLS, and this is one of those things where, if you'll notice, Big IP proper or Big IP classic configuration is, excuse me, a client SSL profile is what is facing the client, and a server SSL profile is what is facing the server. Um, But I know that, and because I've know that, it makes sense. But from an industry standpoint, the server TLS, what we call it here, is more in line with the industry and saying, "Hey, I'm going to serve TLS to you, the clients coming in," because it's looking at it from the context of the big IP itself. So the big IP itself is being a server to the client for TLS, and so when you're defining that in AS3 here, you're going to define a server TLS, um, and then you're going to that references web TLS down here, and then that class is a TLS server. It references some certificates, and then that certificate itself is an object, and then it's going to build out those class remark, and then you have your certificate, and here you're seeing a certificate as a string and the private key is a string. Um, that's these are examples, so that's not a big deal. But you always want to be you always want to be careful with your private keys in how you do that, and you have your ciphertext. So when we're talking about, we'll just take an aside real quick on security practices. When you're doing things like pass keys, passwords, passphrases, private keys, anything like that, and you want to make sure as you're learning Git and you're making commitments into your repos, that you never ever want to commit to a repo your keys or your passphrases or whatnot. So you'll want to build. You can practice this way. But I had a football coach when I was in eighth grade, and he would rail against the phrase "practice makes perfect," and he'd be like, "No, perfect practice makes perfect." Because if you practice the wrong way of doing it, then you're not going to be ready to do it the right way when comes time to it. So his thing was always perfect practice makes perfect. So uh, I can see both sides with technology. Sometimes it's really hard to practice the right way from a security standpoint, because sometimes that takes you learning 18 things at once, and it's hard to do that. It's easier to learn one thing at a time, and the first thing is like, hey, AS3, I want to send certificates and I want to get that up to the box. Hey, that works. Okay, great. Now let me take another step, and how do I pull in that data from uh, somewhere else so that it's not actually in my declaration, so I'm not exposing that that's going to get stored in a repo somewhere. So there are other options here. You can pull those certificates out, like something like HashiCorp Vault or your own private vault, or you have those things hosted on a website internal to your organization that allows you to pull that stuff in securely, and then push that up. I will say one thing that one of my colleagues said is, like, you can use URL for that in the web cert, and you can pull those from the site. But the URL using that is not idempotent, and so if you have that in a fairly large declaration and you have many, many, many of them, every time you pull that, or every time you update that, it's going to, even if there aren't any changes, it's going to iterate on that, and so that can result in slowness and issues, and so it works, but you just need to be careful in how you use the URL part for certificates, but I assume it's for all of it with URL, and so just something to note. And we may address that again in best practices on Thursday. But okay, so then that's just standard HTTPS declaration, and then I wanted to talk about this one too before we look at some of the more advanced declarations. And we're getting close on time, so we probably won't do any more deploying. I just want to talk through a couple things. You can actually use patch, which kind of surprised me, to be honest, because I think declarations and declarative methodology, and it's kind of an all or nothing. I'm declaring, and this is the way it's going to be. This you're interacting with the declarative interface, but this is really an imperative command, right? We're slightly changing something. We're not declaring the whole state of what it should be. So it's kind of a cheater, but it also is kind of a nice thing to have, right? So if I just need to add a pool member to the pool, I can go to the declare method just like I normally do, and I send a patch instead of a post, and then I just add the values. So I'm assuming I could add more than one or remove more than one here, but I haven't tested that. Maybe we should test that real quick. So if we want to patch, well, I probably need to set up some Postman stuff to take a little bit more time. So I'll test that after the fact, and then I'll report back on Thursday to see if you can add more than one. I would assume you can. It would be less valuable if I couldn't, add or remove. One bone to pick for me with the declarative stuff, the action up here. Let's see, where's AS3? There we go. So the keyword here for using AS3 is action. Am I going to deploy, or whatever all the other actions are? I don't like that it's also not an action here. I assume for operation, but the inconsistency. I'd prefer that to say action, but it's op, and whatever. We'll deal with it. But that's just a nitpick for me. But the path is here. It's from sample 04 down to application A, the web pool, the members, the first one in that list. So if you remember, we added multiple sets because we had two different service ports. So in this case, this first one, right here. So that first members, actually, there might be just this right here. So if we had multiple service ports, it wouldn't be the first set of members. It would be the second one. And so down here where that operation is, it wouldn't be 0. It would be 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. And then server addresses, and then you insert your value. And so when you do that, then you get a result, and then now you have 3 server members. And so assume that works both ways. You can use your the op or add or remove or whatever. So wanted to point that out. It's like it looks like. And one thing, hit my mic. That Mark Dittmer mentioned is that you can also do per app within a tenant. And so just kind of like you're patching here to add a new server, I think is in it might be in 348. Maybe it's beta and it's almost out. But you can do that also for patching in a particular virtual server. And so he's got a video on per app API for declarative as well. and I'll post that on the notes, the show notes in the on DevCentral, and you can go out and watch that as well. But the additional declarations in here, there's a pretty extensive list, and when I was talking about adding some of these to the VS Code, I want to come yank a bunch of these and put them out there. And so you have all the different HTTP services that you might deploy, all this stuff, all the different things you can do with TLS, and so go out. Let me add this to the show notes here real quick, or to rather comments. Go out there and grab those. There's just tremendous amount of example declarations. So then application security, we didn't get here. We did talk about it last time, in that when you're doing ACC, the AS3 config converter, it's not going to convert policies and WAF policies and access policies. When you get to Big IP Next and Central Manager, I think that there are some tools in there because you're coming from the UCS where it will actually do some conversions for you. But with classic Big IP and VS Code today, that's not going to work for you. So there's going to be additional work that you have to do. But if you have those policies defined on the box and all that, you can reference those policies. If you have them hosted, in a Git repo or some other URL based thing, you can pull those things down. So there's a lot that you can do with that. And so we are about at time, so we won't go into any more. But there's just tons of declarations out here in the AS3 documentation, and so I highly recommend you go out there and just read and deploy. Load these examples up in VS Code, change them, tweak options, and that's one of the ways I learn, is I just spend time taking what is there, tweaking, tuning, and that helps me to learn all the nuances of what's going on. And if you're building applications yourself from templates that people have already built for you, you'll go a long way to getting familiar with AS3 in no time. So that's the show today. Thursday we wrap this up. We're gonna work through best practices with working around AS3. If you have some best practices, or you have some not so best practices that you would like to share from your experience of what not to do along the way, I would love to hear that too. So anyway, I hope this was helpful dive into what to do on the common in the common tenant, and just starting to get comfortable building applications from scratch and working in VS Code and working with the schema validator in VS Code. And so it's relatively new for me to do more than just toy configs, because unlike John Cowling and all of my friends in sales, I don't work in an operational environment, so everything I work with really is a toy config. But they're in the trenches, they're doing the real work, learning all the nuances, and so I'm glad for them. I'm glad for the expertise that they share with the world. Jose, you're very welcome. And so anyway, thank you all for joining. I will see you all on Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific, I think is Thursday's show. But I'll see you. I'll see you on Thursday. Have a great start to your week, and take care, everyone.
Well, thanks for checking out that video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. While you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. You might want to check out one of these videos over here. And if you haven't already, go check out community.f5.com. This is where all the DevCentral Connects hosts hang out, as well as the rest of the community. It's free to sign up, and we'll see you there.